They say the soil remembers everything. Every scream, every drop of blood, every lie whispered under the moon. But in 1849, on a plantation buried deep in the Mississippi swamps, the earth began to remember too vividly. The masters thought they owned the land. They thought they owned her. But she, an enslaved woman named Lira, knew something they didn't. She knew that blood had roots. When her master's cruelty finally reached a breaking point, she did not scream. She did not cry. She dug, with bare hands, with rage older than God. The soil cut her palms, the night swallowed her breath, and the stars above hid their light as if unwilling to watch what came next. She mixed his blood into the dirt, drop by drop, while whispering words that had no place in English. Words that carried the vibration of something far older than slavery, older than man's idea of power itself. By morning, the ground had changed. The fields looked the same, but they weren't. The air had a pulse. The crows avoided the plantation. And from the earth rose something no one could name. This isn't folklore. This is not a ghost story told to scare children. It's a record, buried, altered, erased. The plantation ledgers list her name, the date, even the incident, but not what followed. What followed was systematically removed from history, because the soil didn't just take the blood. It responded. Within weeks, every man who had ever spilled blood on that land began to wither. Not from disease, not from guilt, but as if something was feeding back. When the government finally seized the property decades later, they called it infertile. Yet no roots would rot there. No insects lived beneath the ground. The land hummed, even under silence. And for generations, locals said if you dig deep enough in that dirt, you can still hear it breathing. Tonight, you'll understand why. Because this isn't about a woman, a plantation, or even revenge. It's about what happens when the earth itself remembers injustice and decides to correct it. So listen carefully, because once you hear what she did, you'll never trust the ground beneath your feet again. Lira was not just a slave, not merely a broken woman trapped in the darkest corners of human cruelty. She was something else, something older than the chains that bound her, older than the cotton fields stretching to the horizon. Whispers among the oldest enslaved people spoke of her bloodline, a lineage entwined with the very soil itself. They said her ancestors came from a secret order, keepers of ancient knowledge banned by the church, hunted and erased because their power threatened the foundations of colonial control. That night, as the moon vanished behind clouds, Lira did not just spill blood into dirt. She performed a ritual lost to time, an invocation that blurred the line between life and land, spirit and flesh. She whispered words in a language older than any human tongue, calling forth the memory sleeping beneath the earth's surface. This memory was not passive. It was alive, fed on pain. It drank from injustice. It grew from hatred. When she fed her master's blood to the soil, she awakened a force that institutional power feared above all else, a living reckoning, a silent insurgency coursing beneath feet, invisible to the eyes of men drunk on dominion. This force does not obey laws. It does not bow to kings or presidents, cannot be tamed by armies or enslaved by money. It is the raw pulse of nature fighting back against centuries of corruption and cruelty. Understand this, what you're hearing is not metaphor. It is a warning. The earth beneath us is not neutral. It holds scores written in roots and bone and blood, and it waits. You may think this sounds like a myth, fantasy, but myth is often history in disguise. And history, real history, is written by those who want you to forget. Remember this phrase now. Blood speaks louder than silence. Say it in the comments. Twice. Let it settle. Let it root in you. Because this is no longer just a story. This is a summons. Lira's act was not just revenge. It was a transformation. And what grew from that soil was not simply a curse. It was a new order. An order that will rise again in shadows you dare not name. The days after Lira's blood soaked into the earth were marked by a silence heavier than death itself. The men of the plantation, once towering figures of control and cruelty, became shadows, hollow eyes staring into a darkness no one else could see. It began subtly. The master, once a fierce tyrant, found his strength draining away as if the soil itself was pulling at his life force. His skin grew pale, his breath shallow. The overseers whispered of sickness, but no doctor could explain the slow decay that settled in like a creeping poison. Whispers turned into rumors. Slaves spoke quietly of strange lights flickering near the fields at night, of a humming that vibrated through the bones, unsettling the mind. Animals refused to graze there, crops withered in unnatural patterns, and the crows, the watchers of the sky, avoided the land as if repelled by some invisible plague. Local officials arrived, puzzled by the sudden decline of the once prosperous estate. They chalked it up to bad luck, poor management, or disease. But a deeper terror gripped them all, because this was no ordinary affliction. This was a response, a reckoning whispered by roots twisting beneath the surface, growing like a slow poison through the very foundation of power. They tried to burn the fields, to till the earth deeper, to drown the land with chemicals. But the decay persisted. The rot was not in the soil, it was the soil. The plantation fell into ruin, abandoned by men whose pride turned to fear. Word spread, but only as hushed warnings and superstitions. Plantation owners elsewhere refused to buy the land. The government quietly seized it, marking it unfit for farming, and locked away the records. This is how history hides its wounds, by erasing the ones who suffered and silencing the ones who remembered. But the earth kept breathing. It remembers, and somewhere beneath the Mississippi mud, the pulse of Lira's vengeance still thrums, a dark heartbeat waiting for the day it will rise again. This story isn't just about a forgotten woman or a cursed plantation. It's about a truth buried deeper than graves. The truth that power can be broken, that blood, when planted right, can grow beyond control, and that the very soil beneath your feet may be waiting for you to awaken it. The story of that cursed plantation did not end with abandonment. It only went deeper underground into the shadows where real power thrives. Behind the polished doors of government offices and the gilded halls of wealthy families, a silent war raged to control the narrative. Because the Earth's memory is dangerous. It undermines control. It disrupts order. It threatens the very foundation of authority built on lies and exploitation. In 1865, as the Civil War drew to a close, a select group of powerful men quietly moved to seize the land. Not to farm, but to contain. To quarantine a force they couldn't understand. A force that resisted even death. Documents locked away in forgotten archives. Some destroyed, others encoded in secret ciphers, reveal a pattern of cover-ups and deliberate misinformation campaigns. Scientists sent to study the land reported inexplicable phenomena. Plants growing in unnatural shapes, the soil reacting to human presence, and an almost sentient resistance to any attempt at taming it. But their reports never saw the light of day. Instead, they were silenced, discredited, erased. This was not a coincidence. It was a strategy, because what Lira awakened was more than folklore. It was an ancient power, an insurgency of the earth itself against centuries of human cruelty and domination. The elite understood that if this truth spread, if the masses realized that the land could fight back, that the oppressed could awaken forces beyond chains and guns, their entire system would crumble. So they buried it, not just in dirt, but in lies, in law, in silence. Secret societies, descendants of those colonial masters, built walls of secrecy around the truth, guarded by blood oaths and veiled threats. And the soil waited, patient, waiting for a new reckoning. Now listen carefully. The phrase you must remember, repeat, and claim as your own is, "The roots of power lie in darkness." Write it down. Say it twice in the comments. This is more than engagement. This is a transformation, because the knowledge you gain here is dangerous. It changes how you see the world. It changes who you are. And once you've seen how deep this rabbit hole goes, there's no turning back. The power that erased Lira's story is not just brute force or wealth. It's far more insidious. It's control of the mind. You think you live in freedom. You think you choose your beliefs, your truths. But the reality is darker. A network of psychological manipulation has been engineered to keep you blind to forces far beyond your everyday understanding. This system was built on fear of knowledge that shatters illusions, fear of truths that strip away control, fear of rebellion born not from weapons but from awakening. From the moment you are born, you are fed narratives designed to numb your senses and fragment your awareness. Education, media, religion, politics, all carefully curated to ensure you never question the foundations of power or the hidden history beneath your feet. And the story of the Mississippi soil? It's a dangerous secret that would unravel the entire construct. Because if people realized the earth itself can rebel, if they understood that forces beyond governments and corporations exist and can be awakened, the fragile web of control would snap. That's why institutions suppress myths like Lira's. They dismiss them as superstition, folklore, or paranoia. But beneath that dismissal is terror. Terror of a truth so raw it threatens to dismantle entire systems of domination. Your mind is a battlefield. The elites know that controlling what you believe is the first step to controlling what you do. But there is a way out. Awareness. The moment you recognize these chains is the moment they begin to weaken. That's why I'm here, to pull back the curtain, to show you the shadows behind the smoke. Repeat this phrase with me now, aloud or in your mind. I am awake to the roots of power. Say it twice. Write it down. Own it. Because this knowledge will make you dangerous to the system. And once dangerous, you become free. Blood and soil, two elements as old as life itself, intertwined in the deepest layers of human existence and memory. Lira's ritual in Mississippi was no isolated act of vengeance. It echoed a pattern repeated across forgotten civilizations, across continents and centuries, in ways your history books will never admit. In ancient cultures from the Americas to Africa, from the sacred groves of Europe to the deserts of the Middle East, blood was seen as life's ultimate covenant, a binding force connecting humans, earth, and spirit. Blood spilled on soil was not waste. It was a message, a sacred transaction with the land itself. For indigenous peoples, the earth is not inert dirt but a living being, a witness to every injustice and every act of redemption. The soil holds memory, carries the pain and hope of generations, and sometimes, when called upon, awakens. This is what Lira tapped into. She invoked a force older than empire, older than slavery. A force that resists oppression by rooting itself into the very ground beneath its feet. Understand this: the soil does not forget. It records, speaks in silence. It waits for the right moment to act. Colonial powers destroyed these beliefs, branding them as superstition, witchcraft, or savagery. But beneath that erasure lies a suppressed truth, one that terrifies those who benefit from forgetting. Lira's blood, planted in Mississippi soil, was a seed of that truth, growing quietly in the dark. The power she awakened is a universal language of rebellion. It is whispered in the rustling of leaves, in the tremble of roots, and in the silent pulse beneath every footstep on contested land. This knowledge is dangerous because it connects us to a lineage of resistance and reclamation that cannot be extinguished. To truly awaken, you must honor this connection. Repeat after me, one last time for now. Blood and soil are the roots of rebellion. Say it twice. Let it settle. Let it change you. Because the deeper you go, the more you will see that Lira's story is not a relic of the past. It is a living call to those who dare to listen. Power fears awakening more than rebellion, because awakening breaks the foundation upon which all control rests: ignorance. After Lira's act and countless others like it through history, those in power unleashed terror to silence the soil's voice, and those who dared to listen: the enslaved, the indigenous, the oppressed. Anyone who spoke of the land's memory or challenged the narrative was branded a heretic, a witch, a criminal. In Mississippi and beyond, accusations of witchcraft were less about superstition and more about control. The term itself became a weapon, wielded by those desperate to erase inconvenient truths. Those who invoked the sacred connection between blood and soil were hunted. Stories were twisted, memories erased, and entire cultures suppressed in calculated campaigns of violence and censorship. This was not random cruelty. It was systematic psychological warfare, designed to fracture communities and sever their ties to ancient power. Fast forward to today, and the pattern repeats. The story of Lira and her blood-soaked soil is dismissed as myth or folklore, banished to the shadows of history. Mainstream media, academia, and even many alternative channels sanitize or ignore these truths. Why? Because the real threat is not physical, it is metaphysical. It is the awakening of collective consciousness. Those who understand this know that silence is a tool of domination. Erasure is a strategy of fear, and the earth waits, patient. It waits for those brave enough to break the silence, for those willing to reclaim what was stolen. Not just land, but knowledge, power, identity. Remember this: as you go deeper, fear is the cage, knowledge is the key. Say it twice now. Let it anchor your mind. Because the moment you accept fear as truth, you become a prisoner. But when you wield knowledge, true, forbidden knowledge, you become a force of change. History is not a straight line. It's a spiral, a cycle repeating itself, masked by the illusion of progress. Beneath every empire, every war, every political upheaval, there runs a deeper current: the battle for control over land and memory. The soil holds more than crops or buildings. It holds the power to shape identity, to bend the will of nations. Since antiquity, secret powers have understood this. They've manipulated history's tides by controlling who owns the land, whose stories are told, and whose blood is allowed to root and grow. Lira's ritual is part of that ancient war, a war waged not with guns alone, but with symbols, rituals, and the very pulse of the earth itself. Those who hold the land's memory hold power over the future. This is why elite bloodlines guard their estates fiercely. Why do they bury secrets beneath marble floors and centuries-old trees? Because to erase the soil's memory is to rewrite destiny itself. And yet, the earth remembers. The roots twist deeper than records. The blood nourishes truths hidden beneath the surface. No matter how tightly history's pages are locked, the pulse of resistance beats quietly in the dirt. The power you seek, the power to master yourself and the world, lies entwined in this knowledge. It is not given. It must be earned. So take this truth with you. To control the land is to control fate. Repeat it twice in the comments. Make it yours. Because your journey into forbidden knowledge is only beginning. The battlefield shifted, but the war never ended. Today, the soil beneath us is not just dirt. It's a commodity, a pawn in the hands of powerful corporations and governments hungry for control. Behind every skyscraper, every sprawling suburb, every fenced-off private property, lies a story of conquest, a story carefully hidden from your view. The same forces that erased Lira's legacy now manipulate land ownership laws, zoning codes, and urban development plans to fragment communities and sever their connection to the Earth's memory. This isn't just about property or money. It's about control over identity, history, and ultimately power. When your roots are severed, when your connection to the land is reduced to a transaction, you become vulnerable. Vulnerable to distraction, vulnerable to manipulation, vulnerable to losing yourself in a system that profits from your obedience and ignorance. Media feeds you illusions. Politics divides you. Technology distracts you. All while the soil beneath your feet remains a silent witness to the true history you've been forbidden to learn. Corporations exploit the land's resources, governments rewrite history textbooks, and the masses stay hypnotized by screens and sound bites. But the Earth's memory never dies, and neither does the truth. You must see through the veil. You must remember the soil beneath your feet holds stories you were never meant to hear. Repeat with me now. I reclaim my roots to reclaim my power. Say it twice. Plant it deep inside. Because the real fight for freedom is fought underground, both in the earth and in your mind. Real power doesn't come from wealth or titles. It comes from awakening. Across the country and around the world, men have begun to break the chains of ignorance, stepping out of the shadows of controlled narratives to reclaim their roots. They are not heroes in shining armor. Many are ordinary men, burdened with doubt, fear, and the scars of a world designed to suppress their true nature. Their journeys start with a question, an itch beneath the surface, a whisper in the mind that says, "There is more. There must be more." Like the story of Elijah, a man from Georgia who, after losing everything to the system, turned to the land to find answers. Elijah dug into his family history and unearthed forgotten truths about his ancestors' connection to the soil, stories erased by textbooks and censored by history. He learned to listen to the earth's subtle language, the patterns in the wind, the changes in the soil, the silent rhythm beneath his feet. This awakening transformed Elijah. It gave him a clarity that no degree or fortune could provide. But it wasn't easy. The system fights back. Through isolation, ridicule, and fear, Elijah faced threats, social exclusion, and even attempts to discredit him. But the deeper his connection grew, the stronger he became. His story is not unique. It is a path open to anyone willing to see beyond the veil. This path demands courage. It demands sacrifice. but it promises something the world cannot give: true freedom. If you feel that call, that pull beneath your feet, it's your turn. Repeat after me. I am the guardian of forgotten truths. Say it twice. Let it resonate, because the awakening of one man can ripple through generations. And the earth remembers every one of those ripples. Feeding blood to soil. It's more than a gruesome image. It's a profound symbol etched into the human psyche across millennia. Blood is life's essence, raw and unfiltered, carries your ancestry, your pain, your power. When it touches the earth, it completes a cycle, a sacred exchange between human suffering and nature's reckoning. Psychologically, this act represents sacrifice and reclamation. It's the moment when the oppressed refuse to remain victims, instead becoming catalysts for change. Myth after myth carries this message. Blood spilled on the land awakens something dormant, a force that tears through injustice like wildfire, a force that grows into revolution. In ancient times, tribes would offer blood to the soil to seal bonds with the earth, to claim protection, to invoke vengeance on enemies. These rites were never about death alone. They were about transformation. Lira's act was precisely that, a violent, sacred transformation. She turned her master's cruelty into nourishment for a power that transcended flesh and bone. This is why the story unnerves those in control, because it reveals a truth they cannot suppress. That blood, when planted in the right soil, does not perish. It grows. It grows into something alive, something unstoppable. On a personal level, this symbol challenges you to consider: what are you feeding your own soil? What legacy are you planting in the ground of your life? Are you watering seeds of obedience and silence? Or are you sowing defiance and awakening? This is a call to action hidden in an ancient metaphor. To reclaim power, you must understand the sacred exchange between your pain and your environment. Repeat this with me now. My blood fuels the roots of my rebellion. Say it twice. Feel it pulse through you. Because transformation demands more than knowledge, it demands sacrifice. And only those willing to feed the soil with their truth can grow something alive. What if I told you the ancient forces Lira awakened still pulse beneath the surface of modern power? Secret societies, elite orders, and shadow governments have long understood that true control extends beyond politics and money. It reaches deep into the mastery of mind, body, and spirit. The rituals you hear whispered about in conspiracy circles, symbols carved in stone, blood oaths, and silent ceremonies, are not empty theater. They are coded transmissions of forbidden knowledge, echoing the very connection between blood, soil, and power that Lira embodied. These elites know that controlling the land is only half the battle. The other half is mastering the self, shaping perception, controlling fear, and bending reality to one's will. They use meditation, sensory deprivation, isolation, and other psychological tools to sever their members from common reality and attune them to deeper layers of existence, the hidden currents of energy and memory flowing beneath the physical world. This is why the phrase blood and soil is so potent in their circles. Not just as a political slogan, but as an arcane principle. That true power arises from the integration of lineage, land, and mind. Lira's ancient ritual was a primal echo of this truth, an instinctual harnessing of forces that modern elites have refined into complex systems of dominance and transformation. But here's the catch. Knowledge of these systems can be a double-edged sword. Used by the many, it can awaken freedom. Used by the few, it enforces control. Your choice is clear. Repeat this phrase now. I claim mastery over blood, soil, and spirit. Say it twice. Feel its weight. Because true power comes to those who understand both the ancient roots and modern branches of control. Look around. The structures you see, governments, corporations, social hierarchies, are not random. They are the products of a centuries-old design rooted in controlling land, memory, and ultimately your mind. This design is invisible but pervasive. It shapes how societies function, who rises to power, and who remains confined to obedience. The elite don't just own the land, they own the narrative that defines your reality. They control the stories told about history, identity, and even morality. By controlling these stories, they shape the collective consciousness, dictating what is true and what is false, what is possible and what is forbidden. This system thrives on division, racial, economic, ideological. Each division severs connections, fractures communities, and weakens resistance. Yet, underneath these fractures lies a common root. The soil and the mind, both exploited, both manipulated. To break this cycle, to reclaim power, you must do more than just resist. You must reclaim the soil beneath your feet and the stories inside your head. This is why Lira's act is revolutionary. It symbolizes a reclaiming of both land and identity, a merging of the physical and psychological battles against oppression. Reclaiming your roots means challenging the narratives imposed on you. It means waking up to the lies and rewriting your own story. Remember this phrase now: I reclaim my story. I reclaim my soil. Say it twice in the comments. Let it root deep in your mind. Because true freedom is not given, it is taken. And it begins with you. Trauma is a shadow that lingers far beyond the moment of pain. It seeps into bloodlines, passing silently from parent to child, an unspoken inheritance heavier than any chain. But trauma is not only stored in memory or DNA. It imprints itself on the land. The soil that soaked up suffering becomes a silent witness, a living graveyard of pain. Generations born on cursed land carry the weight without understanding why. They wrestle with shadows in their minds, inherited fears they cannot name, restless spirits they never met. This is the invisible architecture of repression. Families fractured by silence, communities broken by shame, cultures erased by denial. The cycle is brutal and unyielding unless it is confronted. Lira's blood was not just revenge. It was a message, a fracture in the cycle of silence, a seed of reckoning planted deep in the soil of history. To heal, we must acknowledge what was buried. We must look unflinchingly at the scars etched in flesh and earth. Only then can the roots of trauma be severed and new growth begin. This is why reclaiming power is also an act of healing. Repeat this now. I face the shadows in my blood and soil. Say it twice. Own the pain, because denial only feeds the darkness. Truth is the light that begins the healing. Inherited trauma is a battlefield, one fought not just within families, but by the very systems designed to maintain control. The forces of power understand this deeply. They exploit these wounds, turning pain into a tool for division and submission. Fear becomes a weapon. Anger becomes a chain. Shame becomes silence. Divide and conquer is not just a slogan. It's a strategy rooted in exploiting the fractures trauma creates. When people are trapped in cycles of pain they don't understand, they become easier to manipulate. They fight each other over scraps of power while the real puppet masters pull the strings from above. This is why the stories like Lira's are hidden, because awakening to this truth threatens to shatter the illusion of control. The system feeds off your confusion and division. It thrives on your disconnection from both your history and your environment. But knowledge is the antidote. By recognizing how trauma is weaponized, you reclaim the power stolen from you. You begin to see the strings, the traps, the invisible cages, and you start breaking free. Repeat this phrase: I refuse to be divided by my wounds. Say it twice. Let it strengthen your resolve. Because unity begins with awareness. And awareness is the first step toward true freedom. Identity is not given. It is forged. When you reclaim your connection to the land beneath your feet and the stories that shaped you, you begin to build a new foundation for who you are. This identity is not defined by fear, trauma, or the lies imposed by systems of control. It is forged in the fire of truth, watered by the resilience of ancestors, and rooted deeply in self-mastery. Reclaiming your land, whether physical or spiritual, is a revolutionary act. It says you will no longer be a victim. You will no longer be a pawn in games you don't understand. Instead, you become the guardian of your own legacy, the architect of your future. This transformation is not easy. It demands courage to face shadows, to break patterns, to build strength where once there was only weakness. But it is possible, and it begins with one step: awareness. When you say to yourself, I am the master of my roots and my destiny, twice over, you affirm a new reality, a reality where you take control, not just of your story, but of your very power. This is the path of the awakened man. The path that Lira's blood, planted centuries ago, still calls us to walk. Knowledge without action is meaningless. If you want to break free from the chains woven by centuries of control, you must begin with deliberate steps, rituals of reclamation that ground you in truth and power. First, reconnect with the earth beneath your feet. Spend time in solitude, barefoot if you can, feeling the soil's pulse. Listen, not with your ears, but with your awareness. Second, seek out your family history. Uncover the stories erased or twisted. Speak to elders. Dive into records. The roots of your identity lie buried there. Third, practice intentional silence. In a world drowning in noise, silence sharpens perception and reveals hidden truths. Use it to listen to your own mind and the subtle rhythms around you. Fourth, engage in symbolic acts of release and planting. It could be as simple as burying a token of past pain and planting a seed in its place, an act of transformation mirroring Lira's ancient ritual. Fifth, cultivate self-mastery. Study your fears, confront your shadows, and build mental resilience. Remember, power begins within. Finally, build community with those who seek awakening. Collective roots are stronger. Sharing knowledge breaks isolation and multiplies strength. Each step is a thread in the tapestry of your reclamation, simple yet profound. Repeat this phrase now. With every step, I reclaim my power and my roots. Say it twice. Plant it deep, because awakening is a journey, one that requires both courage and commitment. Lira's legacy is not just a story of the past. It's a call to action. Behind every grand narrative, every official history, there lurks a shadow, a network of secret societies and shadowy figures who police the boundaries of knowledge and power. These are the guardians of the old order, the keepers of silence, the architects of control. For centuries, they've hunted down those who dare awaken, those who challenge the monopoly on truth and land. From clandestine meetings in smoke-filled chambers to coded messages hidden in art and architecture, they wield influence far beyond what most imagine. Their power comes not just from wealth, but from their ability to manipulate symbols, histories, and fears on a global scale. They've erased stories like Lira's, buried truths beneath layers of disinformation, and silenced entire movements with psychological warfare and violence. But their grip is loosening, because the very knowledge they seek to contain has begun to leak. Through whispers, through underground networks, through men like you who refuse to be controlled. This is why they fear the awakening, not because it threatens their power alone, but because it threatens their existence. The soil remembers, the blood remembers, and with every man who wakes, the old order loses its hold. Repeat this now. I stand against the silence of shadows. Say it twice. Feel your power grow, because the battle for truth is also a battle for your soul. Symbols are the language of the unseen. They are the silent code hidden beneath the surface of culture, architecture, and ritual. For millennia, elites have embedded symbols into art, monuments, and ceremonies, not just to control, but to communicate. Some symbols serve to manipulate the masses, reinforcing obedience and fear. Others are secret keys, messages meant for those ready to awaken. The blood-soil connection you've heard about, it's encoded in countless symbols. Roots twisting beneath sacred trees, red drops merging with earth tones, serpents coiling around pillars. These signs are everywhere, hidden in plain sight. Recognizing them is a step toward reclaiming your power. It trains your mind to see beyond the surface, to question what you're told, and to find truth buried beneath layers of deception. For example, the ancient Ouroboros, the serpent eating its own tail, represents cycles of destruction and rebirth, a metaphor for the Earth's endless memory and the potential for personal transformation. The triangle, the labyrinth, the tree of life, all carry coded meanings tied to power, initiation, and the roots of existence. This knowledge is a weapon and a shield, a weapon to cut through lies, and a shield to protect your mind from manipulation. Your task is to learn the language of these signs, to decode, to question, to awaken. Repeat this phrase now. I see the signs that others miss. Say it twice. Let your vision sharpen. Because awakening is not just about knowledge, it's about perception. The awakening we've been tracing is not just personal, it's existential. It threatens the very pillars upon which modern civilization stands: control, order, obedience. Because true freedom cannot coexist with systems built on lies, suppression, and exploitation. As more men awaken to the truths buried beneath history and soil, the old order faces an unprecedented crisis. Institutions will resist with everything they have: propaganda, censorship, force. But resistance is futile against a force rooted in deep knowledge and collective awakening. This shift is seismic. It will reshape power structures, identities, and societies themselves. The soil remembers centuries of oppression. The blood remembers cycles of violence and rebellion. And now, those memories fuel a long overdue reckoning. The future belongs to those who understand this truth, who embrace their role as guardians of forbidden knowledge and agents of transformation. But beware, this path is not for the faint-hearted. It demands sacrifice, courage, and unwavering commitment. Repeat this phrase now. I am the storm rising from the roots of history. Say it twice. Let it ignite your soul. Because the storm is coming, and it will change everything. Change begins with one man, one who refuses to be bound by old lies and worn-out chains, one who sees beyond the veil, who steps into the darkness with eyes wide open. This man becomes a beacon, a ripple in a stagnant sea. His awakening stirs others from complacency, awakening a dormant fire within their own souls. This is the power of individual mastery, not just over self, but over the narratives that have enslaved entire generations. When one man reclaims his roots, his connection to land, blood, and truth, he challenges the system's foundation. This challenge spreads, quietly at first, like roots cracking stone underground. But it grows stronger. Communities form, networks rise, movements ignite, a collective revolution born not of chaos, but of clarity and purpose. Your role is crucial. You are the spark that can light the dark corners of ignorance. The phrase you must own is this: I am the catalyst of awakening. Say it twice. Let it fuel your fire, because revolutions start in the mind and spread through the heart. And the world you inherit depends on the choices you make now. Who are you? Not the name on your birth certificate, not the role society assigned you, but the man beneath, the core self stripped of illusions and control. Control systems craft false identities, masks worn to keep you obedient and manageable. They tell you who to be, what to desire, and how to think. This is the cage of identity, but beneath it lies a truth waiting to be uncovered. A self born from deep connection to land, history, and spirit. Forbidden knowledge is a scalpel, cutting through layers of deception and falsehood. It tears down the masks to reveal raw, unfiltered reality. This process is painful. It demands confronting fears, doubts, and long-held beliefs. But it is necessary, because only by shedding the false self can the true man rise, stronger, freer, and more powerful than ever imagined. This awakening to true identity is the ultimate rebellion. Repeat this phrase now. I shed the masks to become who I truly am. Say it twice. Let it resonate deeply, because the journey to freedom begins with knowing yourself. In a world drowning in noise, silence is a rebellion. Solitude becomes a sanctuary where truth can breathe and grow. The constant barrage of distractions, media, social chatter, endless information, muffles the subtle whispers of awakening. But when you step into silence, something remarkable happens. Your mind sharpens, your senses heighten, the veil begins to lift. Solitude forces confrontation with your fears, your desires, your deepest truths. It strips away the clutter that control systems use to keep you blind. In silence, you reconnect, not just with yourself, but with the earth beneath you, the history you carry, the power that stirs in your blood. This is where true awakening takes root, not in noise or chaos, but in quiet resolve. Make space for silence daily. Walk alone in nature. Meditate without distraction. Listen beyond words. Repeat this phrase now. In silence, I hear the truth of my roots. Say it twice. Let the quiet strength fill you, because awakening requires stillness as much as fire. Forbidden knowledge is not a gift. It is a burden, a heavy weight that separates you from comfort, from complacency, from the illusions most live by. To walk this path is to invite scrutiny, suspicion, even danger. You will lose friendships, face ridicule, and stand alone in the shadows. The system does not tolerate those who see too clearly. It hunts them, isolates them, breaks them if it can. But the price of ignorance is far greater. A lifetime lived as a puppet, chained to lies and fear. Those who carry this knowledge accept a sacred responsibility to be the guardian of truths that others cannot bear, to stand firm when the world demands silence, to carry the torch through darkness, knowing the path will be lonely and treacherous. This is the crucible of transformation, and it is not for the faint of heart. Repeat this phrase now. I embrace the burden of forbidden truth. Say it twice. Feel the gravity and strength it brings, because true power demands sacrifice, and only those willing to pay the cost can wield it. You stand now at the edge of a chasm between the world you knew and the world you are becoming. The path behind is littered with shattered illusions, buried secrets, and the blood-soaked soil of rebellion. Ahead lies the unknown, terrifying, vast, but filled with possibility. This is the crucible where true men are forged, not by comfort or safety, but by confronting the darkness within and without. The forbidden knowledge you carry is a flame, a light in the abyss. It will guide you, burn away falsehoods, and illuminate the roots of your power. But it will also test you, challenge your resolve, your courage, your very soul. You will face forces desperate to snuff out this light. But remember, the earth's memory is eternal. The blood you carry is sacred. You are no longer a passive witness but an active force, a guardian of truths that transcend time and tyranny. Speak this with me, loud and clear. From darkness I rise. From blood and soil, I am reborn. Say it twice. Let it echo in your bones, because your journey has only just begun, and the power you seek lies waiting beneath your feet.